single father with calloused hands and a second-hand jacket, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His gaze, steady, unyielding, rested on the group of sharply dressed men who had been circling the young woman at the corner table like vultures over prey. The billionaire heiress, Isabella Moretti, froze. She had faced cameras, flashing lights, endless boardroom stares, but nothing had ever stopped her pulse like this man's calm declaration. She wasn't used to anyone stepping into her world without agenda. His words weren't coated in charm, weren't weighed down with calculation. They were simple, raw, protective. The men exchanged smirks. They knew who she was. The daughter of one of the most powerful families in the city. They didn't know him, this man with worn shoes and a protective fire in his eyes. One of them leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. "And who exactly are you to say that?" Daniel didn't flinch. "The one who won't let you bother her again." His daughter Lily sat quietly at their table, her small hands gripping the edge of her coloring book. She looked at her father with absolute trust, not realizing the storm unfolding around them. Isabella's heart thudded painfully. Nobody ever spoke like that. Not to her, not for her. People bowed, flattered, manipulated. This man simply shielded. The men muttered under their breath and finally left, their laughter fading into the clink of silverware. Daniel returned to his seat as though nothing had happened, pouring water into his daughter's glass. Isabella, however, couldn't move. She lingered, torn between her carefully constructed world of wealth and the unfamiliar warmth that had just pierced through it. She approached his table, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice sharper than she intended. Daniel looked up, his eyes meeting hers with a steadiness that unnerved her. "Because no one should have to stand alone in a place like this," he replied simply, as if the answer needed no further explanation. Isabella hesitated. Her entire life, people had wanted something from her. Her name, her power, her inheritance. Yet this man had nothing to gain, and everything to lose, by standing up for her. Lily tugged at her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is she going to sit with us?" Isabella blinked, startled. She hadn't sat with anyone uninvited in years. She had always been the one people scrambled to impress, to earn a moment of her time. But this child's innocent question disarmed her completely. Daniel waited, not pressuring her, not expecting her. Just waiting. Slowly, Isabella pulled out the chair across from him. "Maybe. Just for a little while." The waiter, visibly nervous, hurried to adjust the table setting. Conversations around them buzzed, curiosity mounting as the glamorous heiress chose to sit with the man no one recognized. For the first time in years, Isabella felt unseen, not as the heiress, not as a prize, but as a woman who had just found herself caught in the quiet orbit of a man who carried storms in silence and love in his every gesture. And as she sat there, Lily smiling up at her with the unfiltered acceptance of a child, Isabella realized something terrifying. Her world would never be the same again. Daniel broke the silence. "You don't have to stay," he said softly, though there was something in his tone that hoped she would. Isabella's lips curved into the faintest smile. "I know," she whispered. But she didn't move. Daniel studied her carefully, not with the wide-eyed curiosity of someone dazzled by her presence, but with the steady gaze of a man who saw a person before the name. Isabella wasn't sure whether to feel unsettled or relieved. She had spent so long being an untouchable figure in a glittering cage of wealth that she had forgotten what it felt like to be looked at without expectation. Lily pushed her coloring book toward Isabella. "Do you like butterflies?" the little girl asked, her voice shy but eager. Isabella glanced at the page. An uneven, vibrant sketch of a butterfly with wings colored in every shade of the rainbow. "I do," she replied softly. "Especially ones that are this beautiful." Lily's eyes brightened, and she grinned proudly. Daniel allowed himself the faintest smile as he watched the exchange. Isabella felt something tighten in her chest at the sight. It was so natural, so unpretentious. This was not the kind of affection she had grown up around. Hers was a world of cold handshakes, distant nods, and carefully measured smiles. The waiter placed a new plate on the table, something Isabella hadn't ordered. She noticed the hesitation in his eyes as he glanced between her and Daniel. The staff here were trained to treat her like royalty, yet now they seemed confused, even cautious, about this unplanned companionship. Daniel thanked the waiter with a simple nod, as though oblivious to the weight of the stares from every corner of the restaurant. Isabella leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. Do you realize what people are thinking right now? I don't concern myself with their thoughts, Daniel said calmly, cutting his daughter's food into smaller pieces. I only care about my daughter. And right now she's happy. The simplicity of the statement disarmed her again. Isabella had spent her life chasing appearances, headlines, investments. Happiness had been a carefully curated image for magazines, not something as small as a child's laughter over a coloring book. Your world must be very different, she murmured. Daniel shrugged. Different doesn't mean worse. It just means ours. He paused, then met her gaze steadily. And yours must be exhausting. The words pierced deeper than she expected. Her throat tightened, but she didn't look away. No one had ever dared to say that aloud, not to her face. People envied her, hated her, admired her, but nobody pitied her exhaustion. Nobody acknowledged the loneliness of being worshipped. Lily tapped Isabella's hand. Do you have a daddy? The question, innocent as it was, cut straight through the carefully built fortress of Isabella's composure. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, searching for words that would be both honest and gentle. I had one, she said finally. Her voice wavered, but she steadied it quickly. He was very busy like me. Daniel glanced at her quietly, the unspoken understanding hanging heavy between them. The hum of the restaurant faded as Isabella found herself strangely tethered to the little bubble that existed around this man and his daughter. She felt the sharp edges of her world begin to soften. Lily pushed another drawing toward her. This one's for you. A child's gift. So small, yet so monumental. Isabella's manicured fingers trembled slightly as she accepted it, as though she were unwrapping a treasure far more valuable than the diamond she had worn her whole life. Daniel's voice broke the silence again. You don't owe us your time, Isabella. Her head snapped up, startled. Then why do you think I'm still here? He held her gaze, steady and unreadable. That's what I've been wondering. Her lips parted, but no answer came. She didn't know herself. All she knew was that leaving felt impossible, as though the moment she stepped away, something rare and fragile would shatter. The clatter of a dropped glass snapped her back to the room, reminding her of the countless eyes still fixed on their table. Whispers carried across the marble floor like invisible threads, tugging at her composure. She straightened, her mask threatening to slide back into place. But then Lily giggled, pure, innocent, untainted by judgment. Isabella's mask faltered again, and she laughed softly in return, surprising herself with how natural it felt. Daniel watched her, his expression unreadable but not unkind. There was no triumph in his eyes, no sense that he had won some unspoken battle. Only quiet curiosity, as though he too was startled by her presence at his table. Tell me, Isabella said suddenly, her tone sharper than intended, almost offensive. Why aren't you asking me who I am? Why aren't you curious? Daniel leaned back slightly, his jaw tightening. Because I don't need to know your world to see the kind of person you are in this moment. Right now, you're someone making my daughter smile. That's enough for me. His words landed like a strike, leaving Isabella momentarily speechless. Nobody had ever reduced her existence to something so simple, so human, and yet, it felt like the truest thing anyone had ever said about her. Lily leaned closer to Isabella. You should come with us to the park tomorrow, she whispered, as though sharing a secret. Isabella blinked. The park? She couldn't remember the last time she had gone anywhere without a chauffeur, a schedule, or a reason dictated by business. Yet the thought of a park, of ordinary grass and sunlight and laughter, felt intoxicating. Daniel opened his mouth, perhaps to apologize for his daughter's boldness, but Isabella spoke first. Maybe I will, she said quietly, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and excitement. Daniel's brow furrowed slightly, as though weighing the sincerity of her words, but he said nothing. For the first time in years, Isabella felt as though she was standing on the edge of something unpredictable. Not a deal, not a performance, but a choice. One that could unravel everything she had been taught about who she was supposed to be. And as Lily reached for her hand, small fingers curling around hers with absolute trust, Isabella realized she wasn't afraid of that unraveling. Not tonight. Not here. The night at the restaurant became the spark of something Isabella never could have predicted. By the next morning, The world outside had already begun buzzing with whispers and speculation. Photographers had captured the moment she sat with the unknown man and his little girl. Headlines screamed about the heiress and the stranger, hungry for scandal, eager to twist the narrative. But while the city stirred with rumors, Isabella found herself remembering only one thing: Lily's tiny hand clutching hers as if she belonged. Her phone rang endlessly. Her family's advisors urged her to stay away, to protect her image, to issue a carefully worded denial. But for the first time in her life, Isabella didn't care about appearances. That morning, she drove herself, without a chauffeur, without an escort, to the modest park Daniel and Lily visited every weekend. She spotted them easily. Daniel sat on a bench, watching his daughter climb the swings, his expression carrying that same quiet patience. Lily squealed with joy when she saw Isabella approach, leaping down and rushing to her side as though they'd known each other forever. "You came!" Lily exclaimed, grabbing Isabella's hand again. "I said I might," Isabella answered, her voice warm despite the tightness in her chest. Daniel rose slowly, surprise flickering in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to actually show up, not after the spectacle of the night before, not with the weight of her world pressing down on her. "You didn't have to," he said simply. "Maybe not," Isabella replied. "But I wanted to." The park was ordinary. Children's laughter ringing out, sunlight flickering through leaves, the earthy scent of grass clinging to the air. Yet to Isabella, it felt extraordinary. She was stripped of her status here, no bodyguards, no flashing cameras. Just a woman standing beside a man who had nothing to gain from her but had given her something she hadn't realized she craved: freedom to be seen without expectation. They sat together on the bench, their silence comfortable. Isabella watched Lily run barefoot across the grass, her laughter echoing with the kind of innocence Isabella had lost long ago. "She's remarkable," Isabella whispered. "She's my whole world," Daniel replied softly. His eyes followed his daughter, and Isabella noticed how much love lived in his gaze. Love so fierce and unyielding that it didn't need wealth or power to be magnificent. For a long while, Isabella said nothing. She simply let herself feel the quiet. For years she had lived in rooms filled with sound, boardrooms, banquets, press conferences, but never had she felt the serenity of silence until now. But the world, relentless as always, eventually came crashing back. Paparazzi discovered the park. Shouts and flashing lights erupted, startling Lily, who ran back to her father in tears. Daniel stood protectively, placing himself between the cameras and his daughter. Isabella felt the fury rise within her. She had grown up in this chaos, had been trained to smile through it, but seeing Lily's fear was like a blade to the heart. "Enough!" Isabella's voice rang out, sharp and commanding, stopping the frenzy. She stepped forward, her poise returning not as a mask but as armor. "This is not a story," she told the reporters, her tone cold as steel. "This is a father and his child. If you have any respect left, leave." The crowd hesitated, stunned by the unexpected force in her voice. Slowly, grudgingly, they retreated. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Lily's shaky breaths as Daniel held her close. Isabella turned, meeting his eyes. In that moment, she realized she had crossed a line she could never return from. She hadn't shielded him and his daughter for the sake of appearance. She had done it because she wanted to. Because protecting them mattered more than protecting her family's name. Daniel's gaze lingered on her, something unspoken passing between them. Gratitude, yes, but also something deeper. Something neither of them dared to name. Days turned into weeks, and whispers turned into a storm. Isabella's family summoned her, furious at the headlines, demanding she end the nonsense. But Isabella stood firm. For the first time, she wasn't bending to the weight of her inheritance. She looked her family in the eye and said words she never thought she'd have the courage to speak. "My life is mine. My choices are mine. And I won't live in your shadow anymore." The declaration sent shockwaves through the empire she had been born into. But Isabella felt lighter than she ever had before. She returned to Daniel and Lily, her decision already carved into her heart. Their worlds could not have been more different. His filled with simplicity, hers with extravagance. Yet when she sat at that small kitchen table in Daniel's modest home, Lily showing her yet another butterfly drawing, Isabella felt a sense of belonging she had never once felt in her father's mansion. She wasn't the untouchable heiress in that room. She wasn't the subject of gossip columns or a headline crafted by strangers. She was just Isabella, a woman who had found love in its purest form, not in diamonds or champagne, but in the laughter of a child and the steady presence of a man who had nothing yet gave everything. One evening, as the sun bled gold across the sky, Isabella stood at the park again, watching Lily chase butterflies. Daniel stepped beside her, his silence as steady as always. For a moment, the world seemed to pause, the noise, the chaos, the expectations, all falling away until only this moment existed. "She's with me," Daniel had said that first night, words spoken with calm defiance. Now, Isabella finally understood the full weight of them. It wasn't just a declaration. It was a promise, a shield, a choice. And as she slipped her hand into his, watching Lily's laughter dance through the fading light, she realized with certainty that she had found something money could never buy, something even power could never demand. She had found home.